The year was 1863, and America was burning with the fires of a war that had split the nation in half. The sound of marching boots and distant cannon fire had become the rhythm of life, but somewhere amid that destruction, a quiet love began to grow, fragile yet stronger than the iron barrels of rifles. Clara Hastings, a young woman from Pennsylvania, lived with her mother in a farmhouse that had escaped the flames but not the fear. Her father had died earlier in the war, leaving Clara as the only one to tend the fields and keep the home steady. She had learned to live with the uncertainty of each day, but she had not learned how to quiet the loneliness that crept into her heart every night. That changed one stormy evening when she found a wounded Union soldier lying by the fence near her barn. His coat was soaked in blood, and his breathing was shallow. Clara yelled for her mother, but the old woman shook her head. She had seen enough death in this war to know when a man was past saving. But Clara refused to let another life slip through her hands. She dragged the soldier into the barn, lit a lantern, and worked through the night to clean and bind his wounds. The soldier's name was Ethan Caldwell, a private from Ohio whose unit had been ambushed. He opened his eyes briefly at dawn, saw her face leaning over him, and thought he had died and awakened in heaven. In the days that followed, Clara nursed him back to life. Ethan, though weak, never lost the spark in his eyes when she walked into the room. He would watch her braid her hair by the barn window, sunlight painting her face like a portrait, and he wondered how the world could still produce beauty when everything else was falling apart. Their conversations began shyly, whispers at first, as if speaking too loudly might break the fragile connection forming between them. But soon, he was telling her stories of home, how he used to fish with his little brother at the creek, how he dreamed of planting his own orchard one day, and how he believed the nation would heal once the war ended. Clara, who had built walls around her heart ever since losing her father, found those walls slowly crumbling as Ethan's gentle words wove themselves into her days. She would bring him food, sit with him under the glow of lantern light, and listen to his voice even after he fell asleep. What she didn't expect was how deeply she would come to love him. But the war did not pause for love. One evening, just as spring began painting soft green across the fields, a group of Union officers arrived at the farmhouse. They were looking for survivors of Ethan's regiment. When they saw him, they rejoiced, but their joy quickly turned to business. They needed him. The army was preparing for a major engagement, and every able soldier was required to return. Ethan protested. He looked at Clara, and in his eyes she read a silent plea, not for mercy, not for safety, but for time. Time to understand what was happening between them, time to speak the feelings he held inside. But time was the one thing the war never gave. That night, he found Clara in the barn, sitting by the crates of apples she had stored for the coming days. She wasn't crying, but her stillness was heavier than any tears. Ethan walked toward her, each step slow, as if he feared the moment would shatter if he moved too quickly. "I don't want to leave," he whispered. Clara looked up at him, her face calm but her heart trembling like a leaf in winter wind. "Then don't," she whispered back, knowing even as she said it that he had no choice. He kneeled before her and took her hands. "Clara, before I came here, I thought the war had taken everything from me. But it brought me to you. If I had a lifetime, it still wouldn't be enough to tell you what you mean to me." Her breath caught. She had dreamed of hearing those words, but not like this, not when Don meant goodbye. She touched his cheek. "Ethan, I lost one man I loved to this war. I can't bear to lose another." He leaned his forehead against hers, the lantern flickering beside them like a second heartbeat. "Then don't lose me," he said softly. "Wait for me." and I will come back to you. I swear it. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands, the tremble in his voice. I will wait, she whispered. No matter how long. They held each other in the stillness of the barn, as the world outside braced itself for another battle. And when dawn crept across the horizon, Ethan left with the officers, turning back every few steps as if carving her image into his memory. Weeks passed. The war raged across fields and hills, leaving behind a trail of smoke and broken dreams. Clara worked the farm, prayed every night, and watched the road every morning for any sign of him. She received letters, short, hurried notes written between battles. I'm safe. I think of you every night. Your face keeps me going. I will come home. But one day, the letters stopped. Clara felt the silence like a knife. People whispered about a brutal battle fought near Virginia, one of the bloodiest. Her heart twisted with fear, but she never stopped waiting. The world outside was filled with rumors, pain, and the cries of a nation tearing itself apart, but Clara held to Ethan's promise as if it were the last light left in the world. Months later, on a cold autumn evening, she stood on her porch, staring at the horizon. The leaves had turned scarlet, the same color as the flags on the battlefield. She wrapped her shawl tighter around herself, ready to return inside when she saw a distant figure walking down the road. Limping. Leaning heavily on a stick. Her breath froze. The figure moved slowly, as if each step was a battle of its own. And then she recognized the way he held his shoulders, the slight tilt of his head, details she had memorized in those tender days in the barn. Clara ran. She didn't feel her feet touch the ground, she didn't feel anything except the pounding of her heart. Ethan dropped his stick as she reached him. They fell into each other's arms, tears mixing with laughter, the world spinning around them like a whirlwind of color and relief. He was thinner, scarred, and exhausted, but his eyes, those warm, honest eyes, were exactly as she remembered. I told you, he whispered, his voice breaking, I would come back. Clara pressed her forehead to his, just as she had that night in the barn. And I told you, she breathed, I would wait. Ethan stayed at the farmhouse after the war ended. Together, they planted apple trees in the fields, each one a symbol of the life they were building. And every year, when the blossoms arrived, Ethan would pick one, tuck it into Clara's hair, and say, you saved me once. And your love saved me again. They married beneath the white American sky, in a nation still healing from its wounds. And though the war had left scars on their land and on their hearts, it also gave them something precious, proof that even in the darkest of times, love could still bloom, tender and triumphant, like an apple blossom rising from ashes.